Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Art of Performance podcast. Oh my days. Have we got one for you today? But before we do, this is episode 50. Episode big 50. Like, I never imagined I'd get here, to be honest with you, mate. So I am absolutely buzzing, first and foremost. We have got to episode 50 on the Art of Performance podcast. And
you should be proud of yourself, mate. You should be proud of yourself.
It's good.
Obviously, I've only been around for the last 5, but all the work's been done by yourself, mate, and we'll be at 100 in no time.
Exactly. 100 in no time. That is going to be another 50 weeks, but we're going to get there. Don't worry about that. Maybe more. Who knows? Or maybe less. Who knows?
Maybe less.
But let's discuss what we've got in store for you today, ladies and gentlemen, because if you are a HYROX competitor, if you are somebody that participates in combat sports, if you are somebody that wants to get the upper edge on pushing your limits, staying sharp in game day moments, in fights, in whatever it might be, then believe you and me, you want to stay tuned for today, because today we are breaking down the power of nitrates, beetroot juice. We're going to go through things like consumables, electrolytes, their part in performance, and ultimately drop all the gimmicks. Give you the real life shit that it actually works. And there's some really positive studies that we're going to jump into. So get yourself a coffee or whatever you're doing. Get comfortable, because this is going to be an absolute banger of a podcast. Isn't that right, Mr. Akos?
Let's do it, my man. Let's do it.
So, my man, listen, let's start with consumables. Like, we all know that everybody under the bloody sun at some point in time in their gym bag has had all of the pre-workouts, all of the electrolytes, has had all of probably these CBD oils that they rub on themselves to stop all the cramping and everything in between. But, like, do we really need all this shit?
Mate, you know what? That is the best question ever. And you know, I probably am the master and the wizard to answer this question, because I think I've told you on another podcast or before, my monthly supplementation budget or allowance was up to 600 quid a month at one point. Yeah. Forget
600 quid a month. That's a mortgage.
600 quid a month, mate, at one point. And that's when I was like, Akos, sort your effing life out, mate. What are you doing?
Mate, I think your wife might have had the same conversation there with you, mate.
I'm just hoping she doesn't listen to this, mate. She didn't know that what the outgoings was. Only my business partner at the time. Yeah, I was basically experimenting on myself. P-value and number of 1.
This might be the very first ever divorce that anybody's ever come across on a podcast. I'm just saying it could happen. Like, wow. But obviously not there anymore.
Nowhere near, mate. Nowhere near. And I was the guy that go to the, pill and potion guy. Come to me. I'll know something about it. I've always been fascinated with supplementation, which is why when I chose the ISSN as my sports nutrition certification, they're heavily on the supplementation stuff. They want to dive deep into the ergogenic aid and the little 1%ers you can get out there. I probably went a little bit too far with it.
You went down to the 0.00001%.
Yeah. If there was some sort of link to some sort of aid, I'm trying it out. And quickly, I've tried everything. Deaspartic acid, then that when that was out, absolutely everything. So yeah, it's a good supplement. It's a good question, because I've stripped mine so far back. But I mean, I don't know how you feel. Like when people come to you and start coaching with you, I get this question really early into the coaching. Like, well, right, we're going to talk about, the breakdown and periodization of your training. What are your recovery protocols? Oh yeah, Akos, what supplement should I take? I get it so quick.
It does come up really early. But I think more so because again, we go back to the episode we spoke about last week when we spoke about fat loss supplements, right? And we spoke about Manjaro, we spoke about Wegovy. Like, it's the marketing side of life. And I think people see, and I did a post on this the other day about your supplements are so high at the top of this pyramid that in 99.9% of people's cases, we've got to worry about what's going on at the bottom. Like, you're not going to be an elite performing athlete, or you're not going to perform very well if your big pillars aren't in check. And there's only so many ways you can fucking say that. And let's face facts, mate. It's not sexy. Sleep is not sexy. Nutrients are not sexy. Like, progressive overload, getting out in the morning when you wake up, sorting your circadian rhythm out, doing your steps, just fucking breathing for us. None of it's sexy. But somebody goes, CBD oil. Let me show you. Stop cramping in your muscles and make you perform at the 0.5% of the athletes in the world's population. That's the bullshit we get. And they said, by the way, all I'm saying is I should be on TV with that voice, mate. Honestly, great.
That was good. That was pretty good. Get you on QVC right now, mate. That was pretty good.
Little trolley thing that comes around. Ladies and gentlemen, today. Yeah. But the point I go back to is that they I think a lot of people are marketed to in a really, really, really clever way. Like I think at one point, it was 71 billion pound industry recently. I can't remember the stat. I'm sure it was 71 billion pound industry in the UK alone. And that just goes to show how ridiculously vast. Don't quote me on that. It might be wrong, but it's in and around there. It might even be more. But it's because you have to remember where it's coming from, right? These consumables, your B nitrates, we talk about other supplementation, pre-workouts, all this stuff. These are being put in front of our clients' eyes by these big influencers and these fitness athletes. So at the very, very, very early onset of somebody's coaching journey, they're like, what supplements do I take? I'm like, mate, you don't need to fucking worry about that right now, mate. We have to do all of the A, B's and C's first, mate. Let's get that in check first. But I do think consumables, supplements-wise, are relevant early on in people's journey, particularly with like multivitamins. I think it's just a great insurance policy. Some B vitamins, vitamin D with K, like some of this stuff is really important, you know?
Absolutely. I think I would love that people just explore a bit further before they just go, you know, yeah. I used to do it. I think I would have a base supplement profile for everyone, you know, vitamin D, vitamin K, B12, all of that stuff. And I would just say where I'm at now with it is I would just explore first and try and find nutrient deficiencies before you start plugging holes that aren't there. There's no holes there. But absolutely, stuff like, you know, vitamin D3 deficiency in humans so high. One of those coming in, the benefits, the instant results that you feel from bringing that in is pretty high. There's a big list of stuff that it does help with. But I just say it needs to be an explorative process first, just an explorative process, and go, okay, look, are you sitting indoors all day? Do you get outside? Where do you live? Are you living in Iceland? You get 10 minutes of sunshine a day. Okay, let's talk about vitamin D3.
People coming from Iceland definitely need a little bit of vitamin D3.
Yeah.
Vitamin D.
But if you're living in Cyprus,
that, right? Yeah.
If you're living in my homeland, I mean, vitamin D3 is not really a problem.
No, exactly. But this comes back to the point. I think, like, we, especially with people that I've taken on that are maybe more of that athletic population, that are HYROX athletes, or they are involved in mixed martial arts, BJJ, they're a football player, they're a rower, for example. A lot of athletes, and we call them the everyday athlete, right? These everyday athletes that just want to perform at the sport that they participate in or whatever they do, 9 times out of 10 feel like those supplements are going to go and give them the biggest edge. But the contribution of that is quite limited if we don't have all of those little things at the bottom of not big things at the bottom of the pillars, right? Big things at the bottom of the pyramid set out first. And you are absolutely right. I think, yeah, you're right.
What's the point of getting 1% if you're losing 10%? That don't make sense, does it? You're negative 9%.
Yeah, every single time.
Yeah, focus on what's going to give you a 10% increase, like better quality of sleep and nutrition and stuff like that, and then look at the 1%ers, because they are 1%ers. They are. Let's not get deluded in the fact that these performance based supplements, ergogenic aids, do have a benefit, and we do see, increases or decreases in time or increases in performance, but they're not a substantial, not like, wow. I mean, like one of the time trials is like 12 seconds faster. Okay, 12 seconds for a long cycle, but it's 12 seconds. It's not 2.5 minutes,
Yeah, exactly.
So I think people need to remember that it's hard not to go down what supplements can I take. I think, like I said, I've been there. I was like, where can I get an extra, 1 or 2%? And if I do 200 supplements, there's 200% there. It doesn't work like that.
And let's also not forget, you're looking at buyer's bias as well. Like, people will purchase confirmation bias. People will purchase this stuff at not normally a cheap price. Like, there is an upfront cost that comes with this stuff. So what then happens is the placebo, which again we can discuss, but the placebo that is then factored into this because people want it to work is another thing. So we're going to dive deep into a couple of ergogenic aids, nitrates, and things that we are seeing and has been evidenced and research to be actually really quite useful. However, we will caveat this by saying anything that you take, anything that you do, remember, this is just us giving you some information. It is down to you to go and figure things out for yourself, speaking to registered professionals, healthcare professionals, doctors, whatnot, before you do anything. That is the key. We are just bringing up some subjects and topics that we think is important. So let's start with the first one. And this was a question that we got asked a few weeks back, which kind of spurred this into it. So let's start with sodium bicarbonate, which some people on this call right now might be going, sodium? As in the what? As in, like,
baking
the stuff
soda
that you've got in your bloody... Yeah, the stuff that you've got in your
stuff
cupboard.
you add to cakes.
Quite
the
literally.
Stuff that gives you the fluffiness in your dough for your cakes.
So why is sodium bicarbonate something worth considering? Let's talk about the mechanisms of how and what the hell it does. You want to start us off, Akos?
Sodium bicarbonate, like, the mechanisms are basically really keeping it simple, not going into too much science, because I could easily go into this. But in a 1992 study, 60-second all-out cycling test results, athletes could produce 12% more power output. And that's with a dose of about 300 milligrams per kilogram. And it was basically because when they looked at the bloods, so they'd done bloods, they revealed higher levels of bicarbonate reduced acidity, meaning the body was better at neutralizing fatigue-causing byproducts. So it was just neutralizing the effects of the body breaking down stuff, lactate buildup, pyruvate shuttling, all of that stuff that happens when you're just going all out, ouchie. And we've all been there.
The lungs burn, the legs burn, the body burns, it's all burning. But what is really important here is a lot of people think that lactic acid is the problem child, when actually we know how much of a substrate an energy substrate utilization that we can use with lactic acid. So it's really important that although it buffers lactic acid, there are a number of other chemical reactions happening in the body when you do high intensity efforts or bouts of work, and you really start to feel that onset of fatigue. Some dosage, and I know you mentioned, so again, some studies that I've come up against, like we've seen 2 to 3% improvement across sprint interval performance. And one study showed any activities lasting between 60 seconds and 8 minutes long, they saw a 2 to 3% improvement across some of the time domains that they were achieving, which, like, and again, it goes back to that point, doesn't it? Like, when you've figured all the shit out of the bottom of the pyramid, if you want that extra 1 or 2% and you've got all of that stuff in check, well, as a HYROX athlete, 2 to 3% improvement could be a drastic time improvement, especially if it's on each segment, each lap of the K loops that you're doing as a HYROX athlete and a competitor. Like, we understand what that might be. If you're running a 5 to 6 minute K, 2 to 3% could be, an upmark of anywhere from 10, maybe 15 seconds of change that on every lap. So actually, it just reinforces that maybe there is some validity in having sodium bicarbonate. And yes, quite literally, the shit you put in your cakes. Although I wouldn't take it out of the cupboard and just start chucking it down your grid. You're not.
Yeah, I don't.
It's not going to change.
Yeah.
You just see people in their cupboards now like that.
You know it, innit?
Yeah, mate.
It's mixed with water, people. Don't snort the shit. Fuck it, it's not flipping. It's not another white powder to go up your bloody nasal passage.
Oh, mate, that is fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So, and again, but although the dosages, and again, some people have gone 0.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is it's on the lower end, that isn't it, for most people. If they're and again, if you've got all the pillars in one spot, you can then play around with where your tolerance is, really, can't you? You can go, all right, well, that seems like it's all right, it's working, I feel good. Gastric, and again, we can talk about gastric stress and that in a minute.
Yeah. So the International Society of Sports Nutrition, who I'm qualified with, they have a position stand on sodium bicarb, which was quite cool. And they seem to, when they collated all the research, they seem to see the higher dosages never gave additional benefits and only just came with more adverse side effects. And I think we both know the side effects. Have you ever done sodium bicarb, mate?
I actually haven't. I've got no experience in doing it. No, I haven't. Right. Although
I've done everything.
I know I've had traces of sodium bicarbonate in some of the supplements that I've taken, whether it's a pre-workout, whether it's along those lines. But no, I don't think I've ever specifically done sodium bicarbonate.
So it's just basically the issue with it is the gastrointestinal issue. So I was burping for a good 4 hours post sodium bicarb intake. Which is why I would say it's not not worldly used or not like highly used. I don't know a lot of users for it at the moment because it's just that level of discomfort that comes with it and the bloating, possible vomiting. So the risks, can
How does
sometimes...
it taste?
Oh, just salty, salty, bubbly. Yeah, sodium.
I can imagine what it's like. It's like, do you remember the dib dabs you used to get from school?
Oh, and if it tasted like that, mate, I'll be down in the shit.
No, I'm on about the after bloody math of doing a dib dab when you try to put all of the powder in your mouth as a kid. You're like, oh my God, I'm an absolute clip here.
Chuck it with a Pepsi Max down you, mate. See what happens.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, do not take the advice from Akos and I here. Do not down sodium bicarbonate with Pepsi Max. That will be a recipe for gastric disaster. No doubt about it. But actually, if we talk about this from a performance setting, the last thing that you probably want to do in terms of from a HYROX race, like you don't want to be doing this 20, 30 minutes before, doing a HYROX event or doing it 20, 30 minutes before like a pre-workout and then going into a session and literally burping up your entire existence whilst you're doing this event, or any event. Like that's not what you want to be doing, is it?
No, absolutely not. I think that any supplement you need to trial this before competition. So you would trial it out in your training and see if you have any adverse effects, and then obviously just measure the success for you, because there's going to be outliers. There's going to be people that don't have that. It doesn't respond as well, non-responders. And so I would definitely obviously say, if you're going to look at doing it, just try it out. And, this is what's going to happen, mate. People that haven't got all the pillars set up at the bottom, they're still going to give it a go because we've just told them that you can improve your time by a significant amount. So
everyone's going to be necking sodium bicarbonate in the back of their cupboards now. But
we should be putting a link out at the bottom, mate. We get an affiliate. We getting some kickback on these or what?
We must be able to find somewhere on Amazon and just get a payment code, and we're in. Jobs are good.
Yeah.
But just for everybody's awareness with this, maybe what's worthwhile doing is, starting an hour before your session or an hour before a certain simulation that you're doing. see if you feel like it's improved your performance. But again, it's probably not going to give you the biggest markup. And again, I'm not talking from experience here. So Akos, anything that you want to add here, I'd say anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes beforehand is
it's
what's
60
well
to 180
documented.
minutes is on the position stand is 60 to 180 minutes, but some of the studies actually have gone, like you say, a little bit closer. So 60 to 90, I would be around the hour mark, I would say, and try it out and see how you feel. And does it give you discomfort? Does it give you pain, bloating? Do you feel like you want to vomit? Any of that stuff, it's not going to be one for you. Don't try and ride that out. You know, that's just gonna deter away from your focus in your competition. So the added benefit is going to be outweighed by the loss. So
exactly,
and then I think it's a protocol that you can't be doing it all the time. So it is just for competition. You're looking at basically building these protocols in about 3 to 7 days before the competition. So maybe a week before you're starting to dose bicarb around 300 milligrams per kilo, or 0.5 max. I'd say 0.4 max actually. Start with maybe smaller doses and build up, and then obviously on the day you can go with your highest dose, and you've maybe built a bit of a tolerance to it, and you might not have the side effects
the minute
as much.
that you see that the side effects propping in, just get rid of it. And again, we do a pre-event report build up for our athletes now. For example, I've just won for one of our HYROX athletes who's competing in Spain over the weekend.
Nice.
And just gave him some really simple nutritional protocols. It's his first one, and we didn't go through, have not put. We've spoken about caffeine and where that fits as an ergogenic aid, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But sodium bi has not been one of those things. However, beetroot, which we'll come on to in a minute, has potentially been something, and we've looked at that as almost like a race -7 protocol, race -6, race -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then in each of those days, what can the athlete do nutritionally to make sure that they're doing all of the base layer pillars: sleep, steps, activity, managing stress. And then when you get to like D-1, D-2, as in the day -1, day -2, then you can start getting deeper into these protocols and just making sure that you're in the best state going. But for somebody doing their first one, or your first HYROX, for example, you don't want to be worrying about all of this. You just want to make sure that you're in a good place. Maybe a pre-workout will do the job for you because he has been using them before. Good fluids, some electrolytes, but mainly getting the nutritional principles right before he goes and competes. And that's the main thing for a lot of people, I think, that they need to understand.
And it can give you a false reading as well, can't it? As a coach, like if you're going straight into this stuff that gives you that extra boost, it's sort of masking the fact that maybe their VO2 max or their capacities aren't where they should be, but they've boosted it up with a supplement. Let's see where you're at. You know, it's always first couple of competitions is let's see where you're at. Go and have some fun. Don't worry about the time. Just give it your best shot and learn from your mistakes. You're probably going to make more mistakes that with the sodium bicarb coming in. It just isn't negligible because you've made a stupid ass error from the transition from the skio to the run, and you've sprinted out your first 1K run and you're knackered and you've redlined. Stuff
which
like
is
that
what most people will do in a HYROX, mate. And the same would apply for somebody who's going to compete in BJJ and they're doing a no-gi competition, start with early in the morning. You've got 2 or maybe 3 fights. You chucking that down your grid first thing and not really playing with what that might look before in training, you're going into that. Who knows what's going to happen? Like, you're going to absolutely blow yourself out. You're going to get cramp like no one's business. You're going to be gassed to fuck. And now you've just chucked on sodium bi on top of that, and you're burping profusely, and you can't stop burping. Like,
what's the scoring system in jiu-jitsu? Because if you vomit over someone, I'm sure that's a minus point. Just on top of the grapple.
Whilst their mouths open, as you're in mount position, as their mouths open, you're just laughing into their mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, if you came here for education, you're also being met with graphic content. We're here for it. So, sodium bicarbonate. It is not a yes, it's not a no, but it's definitely it depends, context matters type of vibe. So again, that's the first one that we wanted to bring up. But again, mitigating things, just remember with food, understand the gastric side of things, what effects that might have, etc. And that way you can make a better and more informed decision about that. So let's talk about probably one that's a little bit one that's wildly known across the fucking globe. And because we drink it by the kilograms in this household, and it's amazing. So let's talk about caffeine. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this, we can talk about caffeine in a whole different episode, by the way, but as an ergogenic aid and what caffeine is able to do, there has been some ridiculous studies that have been out there, but there have also been some very, 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 very good studies, particularly on sports medicine, documenting things like 3 to 4, in some cases 6% improvements in endurance and reaction time, cognitive function, etc. But what are your sort of your experiences with using caffeine with your athletes, with you? What type of advice would you give your clients?
I think the main thing with caffeine is to understand it needs to be a super physiological dose to get the ergogenic aid in performance. That's the number one thing that people need to remember. It's not just having a black coffee and thinking you're going to be Superman in your event.
Get nitro at Starbucks and just hit the fucking ground running.
So with like a little bit of caffeine, you're going to mask a bit of fatigue. That's pretty much what you're going to do. You're going to feel better because it blocks the adenosine receptors, etc. You don't feel as fatigued and you feel more alert. And there is obviously some cognitive enhancement, but it's super physiological doses that get the actual ergogenic aid. And when we mean by ergogenic aid is that increase in performance from baseline, that increase in that 2%, 3%, whatever it can be. And that is quite high caffeine dosage. It's around 3 to 6 and up to 8 milligrams per kilo. So like if you,
in some cases, like I'm in one sitting as well. We're talking about
all in one go.
Here,
all in one go. Yeah, absolutely. And acutely. So like within 20 to 30 minutes of the performance. So so the upper limit for me, I'm 110 kg, the upper limit of 8 milligrams per kilo, you're looking at 880, nearly a gram of caffeine to get me at the possible ergogenic performance, depending on how much I tolerate caffeine. You know, because obviously if I've been using caffeine, there's a tolerance issue with
this is exactly what I was going to say, because you've got that baseline tolerance, right? So if you're somebody that drinks 3 coffees a day, and again, like, let's talk about the everyday athlete. A lot of everyday athletes will have a morning coffee, a mid-morning coffee. They might have some sort of ergogenic aid later on in the afternoon, evening when they're competing, whether it's using like beta-alanine, pre-workouts, whatnot, caffeine supplementation. So you've already got a huge tolerance to a dosage of caffeine that if you were to try and go into a black coffee isn't going to touch anything when you're going in and doing, a session at the gym, or you're going to go and hit a HYROX event. Like, a black coffee is going to do nothing other than probably get you to shit out the eye of a needle. That's what's going to happen. Like, if you drink a lot of coffee, you know what's going to happen. I'm that meme, right? You know, in the morning when that first bit of coffee just touches your lip and you have to run to the toilet because you know what's going to happen.
Mate, see, my wife is exactly the same. Is that what happens to you? Mate, I could have 12 coffees. I've got no issues.
No, for some reason,
really,
I as soon as I sit down in the chair, I bring the cup to my lip. It touches my lip. My body goes.
Inhalation. Open the gateway.
Like, you gotta go. You gotta go. You gotta go. Oh, mate, it's carnage. Absolute carnage. But we go back to that point. So again, and I think people have. Because a lot of what we've seen in mainstream media, Akos, and this is a great segue here. A lot of what we've seen in mainstream media is people are like, oh, you're only allowed 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine and that's your cut off every day. Well, yes, to a degree. Like 300 to 400 milligrams is probably a healthy range where you want to have, and let's not forget, coffee does have a half-life. It has a quarter life. It may affect sleep quality, etc., etc. So if you're somebody that's nailing 8 coffees a day, there is probably something that you need to maybe look at if sleep quality is shit. However, when we are in a competitive scenario, health isn't always the biggest priority, the performances. So if we're working with somebody who is a HYROX athlete, there is absolutely, again, if they have built some tolerance with using caffeine as an ergogenic aid, there is some ability or some scope here early on before their event, mid-morning. Let's say they're competing in the afternoon at 2, 3 o'clock. There is some scope here to try and get these acute effects of a high dose of caffeine in the system before they then go and do the event, because there could be some huge performance benefits for them. But again, we go back to the point, like, if you're Joanne from Dartford and you go into the gym at 6 o'clock in the evening and you kind of need that performance, it's probably not a good idea nailing 800 milligrams of caffeine before you go for a number of reasons. And because caffeine affects people in different ways, whether, some people get the jitters, some people have, it can spark a little bit of anxiety with people because, again, of the adenosine receptors. There are some things that people need to be aware of with taking it. But the mainstream media, and again, this is probably down to a lot of influencers that have regurgitated shit that this one doctor said sometime, you probably shouldn't go over 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine. We're talking about day-to-day health there. From a performance standpoint, if you've got a competition, larger doses, super high dosage, is going to give you potentially some performance benefits that will go out of that health practice to a degree.
That's where the performance benefits are. It is in the super physiological doses. The normal doses will not give you the performance benefit. They will just mask a bit of tiredness. That's it. You'll feel better, but your actual performance won't significantly increase. If they do get the jitters, you can partner it with L-theanine. It's a great blunter to that. L-theanine to a 2-to-1 ratio, so double the L-theanine to the caffeine content is a great little addition if you struggle with that amount of caffeine. But I know a load of people that wouldn't take those dosages because it does affect them. They just can't focus. They're like, their anxiety's through the roof. They're shaking there, and it puts them off their performance. If it's putting you off your performance, you're not going to perform as well. Again, it's if it works for you. These super physiological dosages around the 3 to 6 milligram per kilo. It needs to be a pretty high dose to get the ergogenic aid out of it.
And by the way, I'm going to bring this up because I feel like it needs to be brought up. Monsters. Cans and cans and cans of fucking monsters. Now, this is a topic in the military that is rife across, because blokes drink them, and so do a lot of the women actually. Blokes drink them like it's fucking water. Now, that is not a super physiological dose. It is about 250 to 300 milligrams in some of them, right? It's not uber, oh my God, G's of Life O'Reilly. However, if you're smashing 3 to 4 cans of Monster a day and not leveraging the benefit of caffeine with some form of exercise and activity, that's a whole lot of caffeine in the system not really being put to good fucking use here. So there could be potential downsides to having, because again, caffeine is an appetite suppressor. It's a diuretic.
Thermogenic,
It's a thermogenic aid. It's heart rate, jitters that we've spoken about, anxiety, like these things, like if it's not managed properly and we're not hydrating effectively with it, and again, we have hydration protocols that we use with athletes like you do too, it's really, really, really important to kind of bring that topic up, because I know guys in the BJJ space that will have a session at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening, and they'll go and smash down a can of Monster and a Rice Krispie Squares bar as a pre-workout. And I'm kind of like, it's not terrible, it's not the worst, but I mean, if I know what your nutritional practices look like throughout the rest of the day, and at this point here, you're at about 800 to 900 to potentially 1,000 milligrams worth of caffeine here across the whole day. Is this beneficial?
Crazy.
Is it really beneficial for what you're doing in the training space as well?
Unfortunately, people just get a spiral with it, don't they? Because it does just blunt that little bit of tiredness and you just feel better. So, but it's a vicious circle that you get into, isn't it? So it blunts that bit of tiredness. You have a decent session in the evening. You come home, you can't sleep. You have a shit night's sleep. You wake up knackered. You get some caffeine in. You go through the same spiral all the way through to the evening. You caffeinate all the way through the day to get you through the day. You can't sleep because you've got caffeine in. And it's a vicious spiral down, isn't it?
You never fucking stop, do you, really?
And if there's not at least one listener going, yeah, that's me. At least.
Definitely a few out there. There's definitely a few out there.
Yeah.
But let's go through some practical recommendations here, because like I absolutely try and think and give my athletes, my client, a bit of from a training perspective. Unless we're doing some simulation work, there's a caffeine curfew in place, and we want to try and sit, depending on the tolerance, depending on how long they've had caffeine in their life, or we want to try and sit anywhere from 3 to maybe 500 milligrams as at the upper end for an average healthy daily dose, if that's what you're going to do, because caffeine can be really, really good. So a caffeine curfew before sort of 2-3 o'clock is the cutoff. Don't try not to take on too much caffeine, especially if it's just day-to-day training, day-to-day living. Cut your caffeine at about 3 o'clock and just try it for a couple of weeks and just see if you can improve the depth and breadth and quality of your sleep. And again, this is a big topic we're going to be talking about on the podcast, but the breadth and depth of quality of your sleep is really important when you're going through these stages of sleep. And we'll talk about those in a later podcast. And if there's caffeine in the system, then that stage of your sleep can be affected in the depth that you can get to for allowing your body to recover effectively. So like a caffeine curfew in place is ideal. If you've got an event on the weekend or there's something nearby where you know that you can potentially hit a super physiological intake or dosage, as it were, if you can do that and you can explore a little bit, do your competition, if it's BJJ, HYROX, football maybe, I don't know, knowing that you could probably get some extra sleep in the next day, great. Then that's probably a good practical recommendation. But if it's day to day, you don't want to be using ergogenic aids up until 10 o'clock at night, really, do you?
No. So what I tell my athletes, and this is my implementation of caffeine, and I do drink caffeine every day, but my curfew is actually midday, nothing after midday, because it's got a 8-hour half-life. I'm in bed by about 9 o'clock-ish on most evenings. I don't want any effects from caffeine. I actually take a supplement that can flush out that a little bit quicker in the evening, which we can talk about another day, because that's another episode. But what I do is I use higher dosages of caffeine on sessions that I'm going to do early in the day. So let's say I've got a big session on a Saturday. I will use high doses of caffeine for that session, because I know I've got the time for it to come out of my system. And I will use that a maximum of twice per week and no more than that. So 2 high dose caffeine intakes twice per week for the big session. So if you're training 4 to 5 times a week, you're not doing 5 big ass sessions. You're going to be doing 2 higher intensity or higher volume sessions, and then the rest is going to be moderate to low and some recovery sessions. So save it, periodize your training well, save it for those sessions and use it for when you need it. Don't be using it for a tick over session at 8 o'clock at night. When you can just get the ball rolling and get some food on board before, and you're fine.
I agree with that.
That's my recommendation.
I love the fact that you've brought that up, because I think I'm quite similar in the sense that on my high stim days, so I break my using concurrent conjugate frameworks. I am very traditional how I do my training, that like those higher stim sessions, and we talk about high stimulus, meaning that there is a lot of central and peripheral fatigue. Like it's a big session. It's high intensity sprint work, it's high lifts, it's RM testing, it's lots of volume. Those type of higher stim sessions, like you've just said, your big days are great ways to actually get a bit of upper edge there, mate. And I think that's a really, really valuable point, because that's where you can test and adjust. That's where you can go, ooh, that fucked me up a little bit there. I'm gonna pull back a little bit. Or again, you can afford to take those, like, take adjustments in those moments. And on the moderate stimulus days, maybe you sit in a middle tier of where that caffeine looks like, and you can almost periodize what your caffeine intake looks like going into training. So
for sure,
great one. And again, we've already.
Have you ever taken time off caffeine?
I did
completely.
2 weeks off caffeine entirely.
Yeah, talk to me.
And
how did that go?
So initially, I'd say the first 4 or 5 days were pretty rough. Like I found myself more fatigued than tired, and I was craving it like crazy, because I could smell it. I could, like, when you smell it, because my wife was drinking coffee as well, I could smell it. So that made it worse. The psychological battle I had was a lot worse than the physiological battle. However, after about 6 or 7 days, it just felt like there was a drop and a complete change in my persona, how I was how I was sleeping, how I was feeling. It started to get progressively better. And I know that some people that have come off caffeine get this big high at about 10, 11, maybe 12 days in some respects. Mine happened a little bit earlier and I felt absolutely great, but then it almost like teetered off again. So after it teetered off, I just got to a point like, I need a fucking coffee. So I just spoke and had a coffee. And that's exactly where I got to, mate. So it was a little bit like...
Standard. Yeah, I mean, I got the worst migraines ever. Worst migraines ever.
I think that happened to me about 4 days in, but it wasn't migraines. It was like,
mine was
like my jaw was aching and stuff, but it wasn't like I've had migraines in the past when I've been really dehydrated, for example. But like my for some reason, the bottom of my jaw and into my jawline was and where underneath the jaw actually was actually fucking killing me. Yeah. But I didn't understand why. It wasn't anything to do with the headache. I just remember my jaw was clicking. I was like, but that might have been because I was grinding my teeth and I was like, I want a coffee. I want a coffee.
Withdrawal symptoms. Mate, I was projectile vomiting. Vomiting. Yeah, no, seriously. Projectile vomiting.
How long did you do off of it?
So I didn't even correlate it. So I just stopped caffeine and I wanted to do 2 weeks. I was like, I'm just going to do, 2 weeks off caffeine. And it was about 6 days in. I was like, I feel rough. I had to go into a really dark room. I've never had migraines. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what is going on? Worst pain in my head, like proper migraines, projectile vomiting, like projectile, dude. It was insane. And I think that scared me enough to never take caffeine out ever again.
Mate,
where I should have been the other way around and said, right, that's it. I'm done with caffeine. I was like, no, as long as it's going in, IV drip it in, it's fine.
Mate, I remember being part of a Clubhouse group when Clubhouse was around, and we were talking. And this was during the COVID days, and one of the girls that was in their tea, I think she did 6 weeks off caffeine. She was going for it, like she was really committed to staying off it. And she had a similar experience where the migraine set in really early on and she was in absolute shit state. Like, I don't know to the level of projectile vomiting or not, but very much in shit state. Then what started to happen was she found herself craving foods and craving taste and craving stuff, which normally she would manage really, really well because the caffeine was satiating her at some degree. Like she was having black coffees, like not all the milk and sugar and stuff.
Yeah.
And by that point, after like 2 or 3 weeks, she said, again, like completely overhauled me, felt completely different, slept so much better, was waking up energized, was going to sleep amazingly. I didn't get quite to that stage. Like I had this little euphoric high for like 2 or 3 days and I was like, fuck, I need a coffee. Like I really, really need a coffee. Give me some of that lovely bean to cup shit right now. That's all I could think about, man. So, yeah, I ended up...
In another podcast, we need to talk about what classifies as coffee as well. Because if you're drinking Nescafe Instant, you are not welcome on this podcast.
Look,
it's not coffee.
There's many things in life that should be abolished. And Nescafe Gold Blend is one of... My mum used to drink Nescafe Gold Blend like it was...
My wife still drinks it. She won't drink proper coffee. I'm like, horrible. What is wrong with you? What is that stuff? Seriously.
If that's you, you're out. So, let's move on. Let's move on to one of the next ones that we were going to discuss. And we've kind of highlighted it already, but we're going to talk about nitrate. We're going to talk about beetroot specifically and what beetroot is. So some research around this. Akos, I know you've got some in front of you. Do you want to go through some of the research stuff that you've kind of found? I've seen some stuff which I'm a bit pessimistic about it, a little bit dubious about the research, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that there is some positive outcomes. I have got a systematic review and meta-analysis that, that the conclusion was dietary nitrate supplementation benefits performance-related outcomes for endurance sports. So there is a ergogenic aid. It's through the nitrite, nitric oxide pathway. And yeah, it seems to be pretty positive. And I'd say maybe the most directly relative to HYROX, which is why we mentioned HYROX, because of the 2017 study that I found with beetroot juice, acute beetroot juice supplementation, significantly improved performance in a 1,500 meter treadmill time trial, but it didn't for the 10,000 meters. So it was a very significant increase on the high intensity, short duration efforts. Yeah. And obviously HYROX being a 1K run per intermittent intensity, it sort of seems like it correlates really well for HYROX. So where I would say beet nitrate would possibly outperform sodium bicarb. But what a good little trial we've got, mate. You take 3 athletes, I take 3 athletes, sodium bicarb, beetroot juice, reverse crossover, and let's see what happens.
See what bloody happens.
Some red, frothy liquids everywhere.
Oh, dude, brilliant. But again, like looking at why it's quite a useful thing. So, you know, where we've spoken, we're going to come into this even more so with dietitians and nutritionists and whatnot in the future. But we've spoken about this offline about where we would, you know, try and cycle some of the different macronutrients around the food groups that we're using early on, particularly with like event -7, event -6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and kind of reducing fiber, reducing fatty intake, mainly because of things like vasoconstriction and trying to increase what vasoconstriction is, the constriction of blood vessels. So it's like the blood flow isn't as, I like to think of it like a river. And if you think about the river and all the mud's just been pushed in and it's got this small little chute, a lot of it doesn't flow through. Whereas if you widen the river a bit more, open the bank a little bit more can flow through. And that's kind of what we talk about with dilation and constriction. So reducing fiber, reducing fat, but then also leveraging things like nitrate leading up to an event, particularly if you're using like an event -7, an event -5, a 3, 2, 1 type of scenario. Using any sort of B nitrate is a great resource, which we have seen a lot with when it comes to helping with blood flow, helping with performance, helping with increasing the time to exhaustion and whatnot. And the studies that you've got, that's the one I saw. That the other ones I've seen is there have been documented improvements with using nitrate supplementation. And this was from the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition. Seeing increases of 16% in comparison to a time to exhaustion group against a group that was the controlled group and the one that was using the nitrate supplementation. Now, 16%, that is huge. And that's where I was like, well, hang on a minute. So doing a little bit more of a deep dive into it, you kind of, that's why the 16% was on certain markers in performance. I was like, oh, it's kind of true, but it's kind of not, which is why you can't just go off of the abstract in a piece of research, because it doesn't paint the whole picture. And you go in a little bit further, the 16% was in comparison to the worst athlete and the best athlete. So you think about so many different variables that could be pertained within that. Like if you've got somebody that's the worst athlete, well, what are we determining as the worst? The least fittest, the one that showed the least capacity. You compare the best athlete, you've got, like, I don't know who we're talking about, somebody that's just made it to become an elite runner, and all of a sudden they've tried some B nitrate, and all of a sudden, oh my God, there's a 16% difference. It's not just relying on beetroot, is it? So beetroot ain't going to give you a 16% enhancement on your performance, but some dosages that may be, well, I know a lot of people are buying these little shots, aren't they? At the minute, they're rife everywhere. I'm not sure. What's your thoughts on those?
Again, so when I did the research, when this beet nitrate stuff got really popular, I would say it's about 2016. I had to give it a go. I was a powerlifter at the time. How was it ever going to affect me? That was hilarious why I did this.
Just like, I'm going to go for reps on the fuck. I'm going to go for a
I think I did some sort of like test, and I was just like, I'm so unfit. How can this even be a measure of if this is better or not? Like, I get knackered going up a set of stairs, but I can squat 280 kilograms, so it's fine.
Oh, dude, I fucking love it.
But I had to ingest a liter of beetroot juice to get the ratios at the time. I was a heavy dude then, so I was about 125 kg.
Yeah,
but I had to do a liter of beetroot juice. So these little beetroot shots aren't doing anything. It's
what dosage were you hitting
dosage.
At that point? What was the ratio dosage?
I can't remember, mate, to be honest with you, and I can't remember the
big
data.
Dosage for you. What were you weighing at that point?
Yes, around 125 kg at the time, and I knew
Jesus.
I got 2 1 litre glass bottles of the Beat It. I think it was called Beat It.
Yeah, they're the
Um,
ones I've seen, like the little red
yes.
shots with a
Oh, was
plastic
that
thing
Beat
around.
It? No, it was a
Oh,
big
maybe
one
it's
litre
not.
glass bottle. Big 1 litre glass bottle, and I bought 2 bottles because I was like, "Oh, will 1 litre be enough? I'll go for the second." And mate, you should have watched me trying to down this 1 litre bottle of beetroot juice. Whoa, like it's not
Mate,
easy stuff.
couple that with sodium bicarbonate, you have got a
Oh,
recipe for
that's
fucking
what I'm
birthing
saying.
disaster.
Candy floss style substances, pink frothy stuff's coming out of me all
Oh,
over the place. Yeah,
so
again, it didn't sit well. Did not sit well. Well, that's all I'm saying to you.
mate, I can imagine
And
the
the shock in
absolute
the toilet
stench.
after when you forget that you've taken 1 litre of beetroot juice and you go
Well,
for your first number 2 after beetroot juice. Have you ever noticed that?
yeah, so there's a beetroot gut test that you can do where,
Right.
and I think the guidelines are still the same. So I think it's 5 to 7 milliliters of nitrate per. Oh, yeah. No, yeah, 5 to 7 per kilogram
Per
of body
kilo?
weight. Yeah, per
Yeah.
kilo of body weight. And you
Sounds about
obviously
right.
down it and you watch the passage of it go through. And again, we'll talk about that in another podcast. But what then happens is they're able to identify how quick beetroot is passing through the system, the color,
Right.
the discoloration, what is happening maybe in the gut microbiome, although we don't know fucking anything about it, but digestive
Yeah.
wise, what's happening. I've done that test. And wow,
How long was it for you to get a red poo then?
that all it came out quick time. Like by the end of the day, I was in shit state. I was in absolute shit state. The agony of trying to, yeah. And to be fair, that was a day where I had eaten particularly well in terms of nailing protein, having steak, egg. So the aftermath of which is too graphic to discuss on this podcast. But wow. But but the same dosage applies, right? I think it's 6 to 12 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, if you're 125 kilo and let's say you're doing the upper end, 10 milligrams, like, fuck, that's a
Yeah.
lot of beetroot, dude.
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
backside must have been in clip.
Yeah. It was not fun. It was
Mate,
not
you
fun.
must have melted the porcelain.
I'll do that on a normal day, mate. Don't worry about beetroot juice. The plumber
dear.
is a regular around our house. Don't worry.
Oh, love it. Love it.
It just the application of this stuff is just not easy. I mean, for these let's say over above moderate to towards elite level athletes.
Yeah.
And I coach a few, and so do you. That you're gonna have to try this stuff out because it would be a no-brainer that if you can get upwards of 10% increase or power output, reduced time to exertion, all of this stuff that you can get, it makes sense to give it a go, doesn't it? But the application's not fun. None of it's easy. It's not just pop a pill and away you go. It's like you're down in a decent amount of beetroot juice before you go out and perform. And yeah, I don't know how that's never going to feel comfortable.
There's also some dietary stuff that people can try and do. You know, we try and where we're in certain stages of maybe performance, looking at spinach with some scrambled eggs. Like if you have enough spinach in your diet, there's a little bit of interesting stuff around that being a valuable natural resource of nitrate. And so but it depends on the tolerance too, because I think what is funny is that two ways in this. Firstly, it's not cheap. Like it's not cheap. And most people don't want to go to the shop and just go and purchase 9 pickled beetroots and smash them like they're sweets.
Oh.
Like nobody wants to do that, right? So you end up purchasing these shots online, which if you look at in a nutshell, and we go back to that point, if you're reading it and it's not 6 to 12 milligrams per kilo of your body weight, if you're an 80 to 90 kilo male, like kind of like do the maths a little bit there. If there's not even a trace of that in there, understand that you're probably just giving yourself expensive shit and piss. Like that's really the bottom line. But where there has been positive effects has been at the upper echelons of that, where people have used the dosage correctly, like you did, I did mine, but mine was not for performance. Mine was, again, just from a gut analysis test. You, doing it a couple of hours for exercise, you have to have a play around with it, mate. You really, really do. And some people will drink 500 mil. Some people will do, like you did, a fucking liter, which is, or 2.
It was insane. Yeah.
Like,
well, I got through the first. I know I bought yeah. The numbers was around sort of 12 milligrams per kilo. So that's looking like 1.2 liters just for a 100 kilogram guy. So I was 125. I was looking at possibly needing about 1.5 liters of the stuff, which is why I bought 2. This is exactly why I bought 2 bottles of 1 liter bottles, glass bottles, and they were probably about £5 each. Good bottle.
They're not cheap. And let's not forget, they taste like fucking earth.
Oh, they're fucking disgusting, mate. I don't mind beetroot in a salad, but you just don't want 1.5 liters in it of the stuff.
Nobody, and picture it. You're blending. Imagine blending that amount of beetroot in your blender. Like, geez, that would be rough.
I'm sure there's the ones out there that do it for that. If it's going to give them the edge, they're going to do it, right? And they're probably not going to tell people about it because they want that edge for themselves. But it wasn't pleasant. I got through 1 liter. I couldn't do the second liter. I felt very not well. Let's say that. And I didn't really know why I did it. At the end of it, I was like, what outcome was there? Like, I'm a powerlifter. What am I doing?
Sometimes we do stupid shit, right? Sometimes we do stupid shit.
Back in those days, for sure, I probably did more stupid shit than clever shit, definitely.
We all do. We all did. Yeah. But let's kind of recap on some stuff that we've gone through there and reinforce some of the bits that we've mentioned. So obviously, we brought up sodium by... some of the main recommendations that we discuss around there with sodium bicarbonate, anywhere like 0.2 to 0.3 milligrams grams per kilogram of body weight, doing it an hour or 2 before the training session, but not on training sessions. Do it where there is a simulation, do it where you've got a big event, have a try with it, have a play with it, maybe do it like you've said. And I love what you said earlier about maybe try and do it in and amongst some of the high stimulus sessions that you've got, just to see how the body fares up. That could be something worthwhile looking into. We then obviously discussed caffeine. Like, caffeine's so sought after, isn't it? But what some of the key takeaways that people could probably pull out of today's episode, what would be some of those big takeaways from caffeine, you'd say?
I think the physiological performance benefit from it. So you need to get the right dosage to get the performance aid over than just masking the fatigue. So everyone's like, I mean, when I say, caffeine can be a really good performance ergogenic aid. I take caffeine. How much should you take? You're like, I do a can of Monster. Like you say, there's 180 milligrams in a can of Monster. That's not, that is not the dose that will give you the ergogenic aid of performance. The other one probably would be to say, keep them for bigger sessions and don't do it all the way through all sessions just to master fatigue. Just keep it for the bigger sessions, or like you say, like a competition where you go for the big high dosage. And then the last one, probably think about possibly partnering it with L-theanine if those high dosages give you the jitters and make you feel a bit crap.
Yeah, we've got a couple of male and female athletes actually that use L-theanine with it because they actually enjoy coffee, but they don't then enjoy the thing that comes afterwards with that, which is worth some discussion there. But again, acutely, we're looking 30 to 60 minutes beforehand, just see how that goes and play around with it. But then the third and final one that we've kind of brought out today, which is beetroot juice, which again, anywhere from 6 to 12 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Like you alluded to, do not drink 2 liters of the stuff if you're a powerlifter. It's not helping you. However, if you are a HYROX athlete or somebody involved in those short bouts of intensity, so MMA, boxing, jiu-jitsu, HYROX, these are all great examples of actually cyclists as well.
Cyclists.
Yeah, that's a great shout. Cyclists, but again, it's not necessarily the longer, slow aerobic oxidative work where you're going to see the benefits there. It's more interspersed within high bouts of effort and intensity, which is going to allow you to buffer some of the stuff that's going on inside of the system and what's happening with the muscles. It's going to reduce that that time to fatigue, as it were. So 2 to 3 hours before with beetroot. If you're a powerlifter, probably don't do it before you squat. It ain't helping you. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
It's going to be an accident waiting and a disaster waiting. But I think the biggest thing with all of these three things, isn't it, is test and adjust, have a play, speak to your doc, your registered health professional, whoever you're working with, to see if it's worthwhile you utilizing. If you are somebody who is a recreational athlete and you're just doing it to take part and have a bit of fun, this probably isn't the route that you want to take. However, if you're somebody that's a little bit more serious and you're looking to take that upper edge, you're looking to find the edge on your competitors and your HYROX, jiu-jitsu, you've got competitions coming up, whatever those things might be, the three things that we brought up today, outside of quality nutrition, the big pillars, electrolytes, and all the other crap that we can discuss on a later date, these are three things that maybe aren't as prolific in mainstream media, but apart from caffeine, but are what we've seen with the research can be quite useful for the people of the upper echelon. So a really, really good thing to take away. Any parting thoughts, Akos, for all of our listeners today, my man?
I think they've got some good information. Please give us a shout if you try this out. Let us know how the the aftermath of taking.
Yes.
Yeah. Please reach out with any anecdotal stories. We always like a little story of this stuff.
We will take pictures as well. If there's any evidence you want to show us, we will accept it. We don't mind. We're funny like that.
Yeah.
But like you said, like assess, because it depends on what you know. And if you are working with a sports nutritionist or not, by all means, reach out to us. We have them in our network. We also kind of work in that space, and we've got people that we can reach out and lean onto that might be able to give you a bit more advice on how this would work for you and if it does. But in a nutshell, like, some great conversation around some consumables there. Thank you for joining us on episode 50 on Gaining the Edge.
50, baby.
Yeah, buddy. Gaining the edge on your performance, and what an absolute pleasure it is to reach 50. Thank you to everybody that's listened to Akos and I today. If you can, as always, please share this podcast episode on your socials. Drop us a review. Let us know what your thoughts are. We welcome any feedback, whether it's critical and maybe it's a bad review or it's good. We don't mind what it looks like. But in the meantime, join us on episode 51, which is set to be an absolute banger. So,
absolute banger.
We look forward to seeing you then. All the love in the world. Take care.
Peace out.